name is John Maddox, and I am a recently minted associate professor of Spanish at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the transition from being a graduate student to being a professor on the tenure track. So here's an overview of what we're going to talk about. The change in my mentality that occurred when I went from being a master's student to being a PhD student, and how that transitions into what I do today. So, my master's mentality was that of a student that had really existed ever since elementary school, which is that classes are pretty much the same process over and over again. You figure out what the teacher wants, you endear yourself to the teacher, and you get a good grade. You repeat. And you do that over and over again. You typically start writing the final paper about 2 weeks before the deadline. If it's if it's not your best semester, maybe it's 2 days or 2 hours, depending on how good a student you are at any given point in time. But at any point, there's a concrete person that you want to please in order to get something specific that you want, which is an A. A PhD program looks a little different because my first assignment, or the first thing I was notified of when I started a PhD program, is that my final paper needs to be publishable. They are preparing you for the endless cycle of publish versus perish, which is the tenure track as we know it today. What I did to prove I could do a publishable paper is I published a paper. I kind of Forrest Gumped my way into the Revista Brasileira do Caribe. I found it on Google. That's probably not the best process for you. I'll give you some ideas on better processes you can go through. But you can also start out with the Spanish-Portuguese Review, which we're doing this for, which is a great place to do your first article because they are interested in seeing you publish. If you need help, they will give you help in a respectful way, a way that is much more respectful than many of the professional journals that you submit to. Hispania, if you want to shoot for the stars, is another option. Before I graduated, I was accepted by Hispania, so it's something that is possible, but it is more challenging than the Spanish-Portuguese Review. In my experience, every professor wants the same thing: a student who publishes and gets a tenure track. These are very, very hard to get, and the two processes are related. The professor wants you to publish, if not immediately, eventually, because that is something that reflects well on them. And if you want extra help, if your goal is to get a published article, many professors will give you extra help, maybe read a previous draft, to reach that goal, because you are making yourself look good and making them look good. It's not easy, but they are related. If you want to get a tenure track job, I have sat on hiring committees for tenure track positions. We are handed a stack of over 100 applications. In many fields, it'll be over 300 applications. And I've been asked to pick people from this giant stack of applications. Before I even look at your letter of recommendations or whatever, I look at whether or not you published. If you do not publish, I will not vote for you to get a job. I know that that is shocking for some, but that's what I was told when I was in graduate school. You have to publish if you want to get a tenure track job. You at least need to be submitting by the time you finish classes, because in an ideal world, you get a publication before you go in for your job interview, and you don't know when these publications are going to come out. If you are accepted in 1 year, your article may come out 3 years later. So the earlier you start, the better. So the PhD mentality is The course is a pretext for an article. So you go ahead and start thinking about the article before you take the class. So your undergraduate and your master's probably taught you uh, the knowledge you need to publish an article, or at least start working on the idea of a publishable idea. So, for example, I had the idea of translating La Cuarterona, an abolitionist play. And then I take a class with Edward Friedman, who's one of the greatest peninsularists, Golden Age scholars that there ever was. But he doesn't work on Puerto Rico. I didn't really work on Spain that much at the time. So he agreed to work with me to do that translation. That's something I set up with him from the beginning of the class. In the case of Rosario Ferre, I'd already read some work by her, and then I took a class with Benito Trigo, who's a specialist in Caribbean women's literature. I worked with him on that. So you're making your academic profile fit your professors before you even take the class. That way you don't have to guess what they like, what they don't like. Is this personal? Is this not? No, you know what they do before you take the class, and you're going to work with them on something that is of interest to them. You start that process before the class begins. You start working on your final paper from the beginning of class, and you revise it over the course of the semester. Maybe not every time will that process work, but it's worked for me multiple times, and I recommend it. It helps with the anxiety of the end of the semester when you have to come up with something at the end, and typically what will come out at the end will be mediocre if it's something that you've procrastinated on. So start publishing and perishing. How to find or perishing? Find a journal. You can check out the gossip on Mark Del Mastro's page that will tell you what journals are good and what journals are not so good as far as their time frames in terms of rejection, notification, communication, etc. MLA will tell you what are highly ranked journals. Journals are ranked not by what they publish, but by what they don't publish. They're ranked by their rejection rate. You want to at least start out with a journal that has a mid-range rejection rate, and typically it's one that your professors have already published in. I'm not a linguist by trade. I have worked with linguists on projects. I would check out the Brigham Young linguistics list, and Eric will tell you about education journals to give you an idea of where you could publish. It's a little bit better than just Forrest Gumping your way through Google until you find a journal that comes up when you pop in Caribbean and Brazil. Be obsessive with the format, because the journal will also be obsessive with the format. So you treat the MLA style guide, or whatever your style guide is, like the Bible, and you need to be a fundamentalist. The comma goes there. It does not go anywhere else. There is no other interpretation of the comma. That's where the comma goes. It's a comma, not a period. You need to seek to have perfect language. You need to seek to not go over the word limit. Put together a short abstract. Be organized. Be clear. Don't be jargony. They'll all tell you that, but then they also want cool abstract theory, which inevitably leads to jargon. So read the journal before that to see what they like in terms of jargon. And you need to be prepared to subscribe to the journal. If you have a job, then they may help you pay for that journal. If not, then you're going to have to pay for that subscription out of pocket. Typically, journals are here to serve you, but they have to pay their bills. So be prepared to pay a little bit along this process. Do not submit to multiple journals at once. You'll probably get 2 to 3 reader reports back. Revise and resubmit is going to be very, very common. Take them up on that because it's more of a sure thing than just sending it off to a random journal, right? And they give you specific feedback. Follow it. Don't argue with that feedback. Do as you're told, right? If you're rejected, make those suggested changes anyway, because you may have the same reader looking at your article the next time you send it out. Eventually, the spaghetti will stick to the wall. So you keep throwing the spaghetti at the wall and see if it sticks. Eventually, it will stick. Once you have a tenure track job, you switch unpublished papers to the new university. As soon as you sign that contract with your new job, you need to change it from your grad school institution to your new institution, because the new institution will get credit for that. Then you send out your next article. Then you start working on the book. And then you keep sending things out and getting rejected and getting rejected and getting rejected until you are accepted, and your life will continue in academia. And you are already doing the thing that we are trained to do from day one, which is write a publishable paper, which eventually turns into writing a publishable book. When you get hired, and in many cases, if you have a good program, there will also be a third factor, which is grants, which are ostensibly money to help your project. Once you are hired for a tenure track job, it becomes money for the university. So, or reputation for the university, or both. So they're going to start pushing you to write grants, sometimes even more than articles themselves. So you work on your paper, you teach a class on the paper, so it's already affecting your scholarship, or your teaching. You publish your paper, you build your CV, then you get prizes for the next paper, and you build your CV. So when you're writing a grant proposal, you're also writing a rough draft for your paper or your book. You travel with the prize money that you get from your grant, and then you write the paper, and then you continue that cycle. It's a cycle of constant rejection. You will be rejected for the grant. You will be rejected for the article, oftentimes repeatedly, and sometimes you get the pleasant surprise of being accepted with revisions. Then you make the revisions and you continue until you are accepted. So, in conclusion, the tenure track lifestyle begins on the first day of your PhD. Master's programs are there to help you learn. PhD programs are there to help you make. You are not drastically different from a factory worker on a line. You're sending out an article, sending out another article, sending it out on down the line. PhDs are here to make. They've already learned. You learn a lot through the process, but you're here to make articles. Publications mean that you'll be a better job candidate, and it's not easy out there. So you want to be as competitive as possible. This is how you compete. Thank you for your time, and best of luck. Go Blazers.